All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to Miss Walker's afternoon story time. We are going to pick up where we left off yesterday with how to train your dragon. In this part of our story, Hiccup has been chosen to go talk to the gigantic um, sea dragon that has shown up on the beach. And we are going to start with chapter 12. Let me switch my windows so you guys can see that screen. Hopefully, well, hold on a second. Miss Walker will get it together here in a second. There we go. All right, so here we are with chapter 12, The Green Death. It is one thing to approach a primeval nightmare when you are part of a crowd of 400 people. It is quite another to do so on your own. Hiccup had to force himself to put one foot in front of the other. Stoic offered to send a guard of his finest soldier, but Hiccup preferred to go alone. Less chance of anybody doing anything heroic or stupid, he said. Although this part of the story that bards tend to focus on a bit more where Hiccup was particularly heroic, I do not agree. It is a lot easier to be brave when you know you have no alternative. Hiccup knew in his heart of hearts that the monster intended to kill them all anyway, so he didn't have a lot to lose. Nevertheless, he was sweating when he peered over the edge of the cliff. There below him was an impossibly large dragon. Filling up the beach, it appeared to be asleep. But an eerie singing was coming from the direction of its belly. The song went something like this: Watch me, great destroyer, so I settled down to launch. Killer whales are tasty because they've got lots of crunch. Great sharks are scrumptious, but here's a tip. Those teeny weeny toothpick can give you a nasty nip. How odd, thought Hiccup. He can sing with his mouth shut. Hiccup nearly jumped clear of his leggings when a dragon opened up his crocodile eyes and spoke directly to him. Odd, he said, the dragon, who appeared to be amused. A dragon with his eyes shut is not necessarily asleep. So it follows that a dragon with his mouth shut is not necessarily singing. All is not what it seems. That noise that you hear is not from me at all. That, my hero, is a sound of a singing supper. Singing supper, echoed Hiccup quickly, remembering that you should never, ever look into the eyes of a large, malevolent dragon like this one. He fixed his gaze firmly on one of the dragon's tal- talons instead. Whew, let's see if Miss Walker can enunciate today. This was a mistake, as Hiccup suddenly realized that the dragon was holding a herd of pathetically beeping sheep captive under one massive claw. He pretended to allow one of them escape and let the poor animal practically reach safety of the rocks when it picked it up by its wool with a delicate pincer movement and tossed it way, way into the air. It was a trick Hiccup had often done himself, but with blackberries. Now the dragon threw back his great head, and the woolly speck fell down into its terrible jaws, which closely behind it with a mighty crash. There was a horrible sound of crunching as he chewed and swallowed the unfortunate sheep. The dragon saw Hiccup watching him with fascinated horror, and he brought his ridiculously enormous head down closer to the boy. Hiccup nearly passed out as his offensive dragon breath poured out of its disgusting yellow green vapor. It was the stench of death itself. The dead, head spinning stench of decaying matter, of rotting haddock heads and sweating whales, and long dead shark and despairing souls. The revolting steam curled its way around the boy in repellent coils, wormed its way into its nose until he had coughed and sputtered. Some people say you should debone a sheep before you eat it, sneered the dragon confidently. But I think it adds a nice crunch to what would otherwise be a soggy meal. The dragon burped. The belch came out as a perfect loop of fire and soared through the air like a smoke ring and landed on Hither's surrounding. Hiccup settling it alight so that for a moment he was standing right in the middle of the circle of bright green flames. The hither was damp, however, and the blaze flared for only a few moments, then it extinguished itself. Oops, giggled the dragon evilly. Pardon me. A little party trick. He placed one gigantic claw against the edge of the cliff the Hiccup was standing on. Humans, however, he continued thoughtfully, humans really should be filleted. The spine, in particular, can be tricky as it goes down the throat. As the dragon spoke, he extended his claws and talons, slowly emerging from the thick stumps of his fingers and raising it up until they resembled nothing more than six gigantic razors, 6 feet wide and 20 feet long, with points on the end like a surgeon's scalpel. Removing the human backbone is a delicate job, hissed the dragon nastily, but one I am particularly good at. A small incision at the back of the neck, he just gestured towards Hiccup's neck. A swift stroke downward and flick it out. It's practically painless. For me. The dragon's eyes lit up with the purest pleasure. Hiccup was thinking very fast indeed. There was nothing like staring death in the face for speeding up your thoughts. What did he know about dragons that could work against a invincible monster like this one? He could see the dragon motivation page he had written in his mind's eye. Gratitude. Dragons are not grateful. Fear. Clearly hopeless. Greed. Not a good idea to appeal to this particular point. Vanity, revenge could be useful, but couldn't quite think of how. Left jokes and riddle talk. This dragon looked a bit exalted for jokes, but his manner, talking clearly, fancied himself a bit of a philosopher. Maybe Hiccup could buy himself some time if he engaged him in a riddling conversation. I heard the singing for your supper, said Hiccup. But what is a singing supper? Good question, said the dragon in surprise. An excellent question, in fact. He drew back his claws, and Hiccup sighed with relief. It's a long time since his supper had shown such intelligence. They're generally too bound up with their little lives to bother with really big questions. Now let me think, said the dragon. And as he thought, he forked a protesting sheep up on end of his talon, chewed it on on it reflectively. Hiccup was sorry for the sheep, but deeply grateful it wasn't him disappearing down the ravenous reptilian's gullet. How shall I put it? To a brain so much smaller and less clever than mine, the thing is, we all, in a sense, supper, walking, talking, breathing suppers. That's what we are. Take you, for instance. You are about to be eaten by me. So that makes you supper. That's obvious. But even a murderous carnival like myself will be a supper for worms one day. We're all snatching precious moments from peaceful jaws of time, said the dragon cheerfully. That's why it's so important, he continued, for supper to sing as beautifully as it can. He gestured to his stomach, where the voice could be heard singing, though more and more faintly. Humans can be bland, but if you have some salt at hand and a bit of brine, you can make them taste divine. That particular supper, said the dragon, you hear singing now, was a dragon rather smaller than me, but very full of himself. I ate him about a half an hour ago. Isn't that cannibalism? Asked Hiccup. It's delicious, said the dragon. Besides, you can't call an artist like myself a cannibal. He sounded a bit exasperated now. Hold on, guys. I have to take a drink of water. My throat's suddenly scratchy. All right, here we go. He sounded a bit exasperated now. That's the dragon. You are a very rude for such a small person. What do you want, little supper? I have come, said Hiccup, to find out whether you come in peace or in war. In peace, I think. I'm going to kill you, though, he added. All of us, you first, and then everybody else, when I've had a little nap and got my appetite back. It takes a while to wake up completely from a sleep coma. But fair, said Hiccup. Why do you get to eat everybody just because you're bigger than everybody else? It's the way of the world, said the dragon. Besides, you'll find that you come around to my point of view once you're inside me. The marvelous thing about digestion. But where are my manners? Let me introduce myself. I am the Green Death. And what is your name, little supper? Hiccup, horrendous, Haddock the Third, said Hiccup. And the extraordinary thing happened. As Hiccup said his name, the Green Death trembled, and a sudden wave made him shiver. Neither the Green Death nor Hiccup noticed. Said the Green Death. I'm sure I've heard that name somewhere before. It's a mouthful, so I shall call you Little Supper. Now, Little Supper, before I eat you, tell me your problem. My problem? Said Hiccup. That's right. Your why can't I be more like my father problem. Your it's hard to be a hero problem. Your snout lout the world's much better chief than me problem. I've helped the problems of many of my supper. Somehow meeting a really big problem like myself seems to put everything into proportion. Let me get this straight, said Hiccup. You know about my father and me not being a hero and everything? I can see things like that, said the Green Death modestly, and you want me to tell you my problems and then you're going to eat me? We're back at the beginning again, sighed the Green Death. We're all going to be eaten sometime. You can win yourself some extra time, though, if you're a smart little crab stick. A few scraps of the Green Death yawned. Suddenly, I'm rather tired. You are clever, Crabstick. You've kept me talking for ages, the dragon yawned. I'm too tired to eat you now. You'll have to come back in a couple hours, and I'll tell you how to deal with your problem then. I have a feeling I can help you. And the terrible monster really did fall asleep this time, snored very heavily. His great claws relaxed and fell open, and the remaining sheep and their woolly sides trembled in terror, scrambled over the tops of the terrible talons, and bolted towards the cliff. Hiccup, watching the dragon thoughtfully for a second, then he trudged slowly back through the heather towards the village. Everybody cheered when he walked through the gates. Was carried shoulder high and set down in front of his father. Well, son, said Stork, does the beast come in peace or war? He says he comes in peace, said Hiccup. There was huge hurrahs and stampings of feet, and Hiccup held up his hand for silence. He's still going to kill us, though. See the sheep escaping there on the picture? All right, chapter 13. When the yelling doesn't work. The dragon slept on as the council of war argued over what to do next. I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to Professor Yobish, said Stork the Vast. This book needs more words to tell you what to do if yelling doesn't work. Which shows how cross Stork was. He never wrote a letter if he could help it. Stork, in fact, was really rattled for the first time in his life. This is what comes from not following the law, he thought to himself. If I had banished the boys last night, like I should have, they would not be here to die with the rest of us. I should have put my trust in Thor. Magoon the meathead had not yet realized the gravity of the situation. He thought it was a question of constructing some kind of megaphone machine to yell even bigger. The gigantic dragon needs a gigantic yell, he said. We've already tried that, Plankton Brain, said Stoic. Who are you calling Plankton Brain? Demanded Morgan. They were whiskier and whiskier for a couple of furious walruses. Hiccup sighed and walked out of the village. He had a feeling the grown-ups weren't going to come up with anything fiendishly clever. To Hiccup's surprise, he was followed not only by fish legs, but by all the novices from both the hooligan and the meathead tribes. They stood around Hiccup in a semicircle. So Hiccup, said Thurgoody, the meathead, what are we going to do now? What do you mean by asking Hiccup? Demanded Snoutlight crossly. You're going to ask the useless to get us out of this mess, are you? He just single handedly got us to fail the final initiation test. We are all about to be banished and eaten by cannibals because of him. He can't even control a dragon the size of an earwing. You can talk to dragons, then Snotface, said Fishlegs. I'm pleased to say I cannot, said Snoutloud. Well, then shut up, said Fishlegs. Snoutloud got a hold of Fishlegs by the arm and started twisting. Nobody tells Snotface Snoutloud to shut up, hissed Snoutloud. I do, said Thury the meathead. He grabbed Snoutloud by the shirt and lifted him clear off the ground. Hold on, there's a picture. Your dragon got us failed just as much as his. If you didn't notice anybody's dragon sitting up begging like a good boy in the middle of the dragon fight, you shut up or I will tear you limb from limb and feed you to the gulls. You wrinkle hearted, seaweed brain, limp eating pig. Snoutlout looked at Thurgood's stern eyes and shut up. Thurgood, he dropped him and wiped his hands disdainfully on his tunic. Anyway, my father was on that stupid council of elders too. I'm with Hiccup. What kind of father puts stupid laws above his life of his son? And what kind of stupid test was it anyway? We save all those stupid people from a real dragon like this one, and maybe they'll let us into their stupid tribe after all. Well, well, thought Hiccup. This is a turn for the books. Maybe the dragon was right. He was going to help me with my hard to be a hero problem before he eats me, of course. One solo meeting with Green Death, and there were 19 young barbarians, most of them bigger and tougher and rougher than Hiccup, looking at Hiccup expectantly to tell them what to do. Hiccup stood on tiptoe and tried to look like a hero. Okay, I think I need some time to think. Give the boy some room here, yelled Thoroughly, pushing the others back. He swept off a rock for Hiccup to sit on. Just do all the thinking you need to do, boyo, said Early. This situation needs a lot of thought, and I have a feeling you're the only one here who can do it. Anybody who can have a 20-minute conversation with a winged shark the size of a planet and come out alive is a better thinker than I am. Hiccup found himself warming to Thuggery the meathead. Quiet, yelled Thuggery. Hiccup is thinking, and Hiccup thought and thought. After about an hour, Thuggery said, whatever you're thinking about to get rid of that monster had better work for both of them. There's another dragon, said Hiccup. Thuggery nodded. I went to the highest point and spotted him while you were having your chat with the green one. Okay. That's good news, actually. Let's check the new horror. The trail to the highest point littered with scallop shells, dolphin bones thrown up by the gigantic storm. All the way, even they passed the wreck of Stork's favorite ships, the Pure Adventure, lost at sea 7 years before, now perched crazily on a rock 3/4 of the way up the biggest hill on Burke. Once you were right on top of the possible to see most of Burke's coastline, the sea encircling the sides, right at the other end of the island was a dragon, entirely filled up the unlandable cove and spilled over its side. It was resting its vast, wicked chin on the cliff as a pillow. Giant fumes of violet smoke were belching out of its snoring nostrils. It was another sea dragon, Gigantus Maximus. This time, the glorious blue purple color, if anything, was slightly larger than the one at Longbeat. The purple death, I presume, whispered Hiccup shakily. This is what we need. Are you sure there aren't any more? Thuggery laughed hysterically. I think it's just two nightmare killing machines. Isn't two enough for you? Back at the highest point, Hiccup outlined his plan of action. It was fiendishly clever, if a little desperate. We aren't big enough to fight these dragons, but they can fight each other. We have to get them really angry at one another. We hooligans concentrate on the green death, and then you meatheads deal with the purple death. The one thing we need is our own dragons who seem to have disappeared, so we better start calling them. They started calling their dragons as loudly as they dared, which was no louder as there was no response. 20 dragons that belonged to the novices were not, in fact, very far away. They had made their way after the dragon fight and were now hiding in a piece of boggy bracken about 100 yards or so away from the boys standing at the highest point. They were crouching like cats in ferns, wicked eyes gleaming, and they were so exactly shade a clump of bracken that they seemed to have melted entirely into the bog. If you had been a rabbit or deer, you would not have noticed until you felt talons on your back and hot fire on your neck. So they had been following the boys for a while. So, whispered Fireworm with her tongue flicking viciously, what do we do now? Ow. The power is shifting on this island. The masters will not be the masters much longer. They will be trapped like lobsters in a pot. We are not. We can fly whenever we want to. Do we obey or desert? The dragons were not the sort of creatures to back a loser. Whatever we do, Brightclaw says, let's do it quickly. My wings are freezing up. We could kill the boys now and take them as an offering to the new master, suggested Sea Slug, with a grunt of greedy pleasure. What, that green devil on the beach? Said Howard placidly. I don't like the look of him myself. He has too big of an appetite. He might find ourselves the next offering. We fly then, said Brightclaw, with the others murmuring. Silence, said his fireworm. These islands are perilous, she sneered. We might fly from one danger straight into another mouth of one. I say we obey until we're sure they have lost. When that time comes, I will give the signal for us to desert. And so, as if from nowhere, fireworms, sea slug, horror crow, killer, brightclaw, and alligator, and all the other dragons flew out of their hiding place and came circling slowly up the highest point, landing on each boy's outstretched arm. Last came Toothless, complaining horribly. Dragon, said Hiccup, and he explained the feverishly clever plan. And we will stop right there, guys. That brings us to chapter 14, and we will pick up there on Monday. So, hold on.
Bye.